He even defends him when Laurie is bad-mouthing him.
Yeah. That speech was like gunpowder. Laurie looked at her a minute as if he did not know what to do with himself, then turned sharply away, saying in a desperate sort of tone, "You'll be sorry someday, Joe." "Oh, where are you going?" she cried, for his face frightened her. "To the devil," was his consoling answer. And again, this is just like what you said, the 1933 version uses that line, that "you'll be sorry someday, Joe," or "you'll regret this," and the other versions aren't as much like that. What man are you going to feel sorry for if they're basically being like, this is the equivalent of like when men ask you out and they say, "Oh, you're so beautiful. You want to go to dinner?" And then you say, "Oh, no, I'm not interested." And they say, "Oh, you're ugly anyway." Like, it's the same kind of red flag.
He's threatening her, going to the devil. For a minute Joe's heart stood still as he swung himself down to the bank toward the river. But it takes much folly, sin, or misery to send a young man to a violent death, and Laurie was not one of the weak sort who are conquered by a single failure. He had no thought of melodramatic plunge, but some blind instinct led him to fling hat and a coat into his boat and row away with all his might, making better time up the river than he had done in many a race. Jo drew a long breath and unclasped her hands as she watched the poor fellow trying to outstrip the trouble which he carried in his heart. That will do him good, and he'll come home in such a tender, penitent state of mind that I shan't dare to see him, she said, adding as she went slowly home, feeling as if she had murdered some innocent thing and buried it under the leaves. I think if I would be Joe, I would be a lot less sympathetic towards Laurie.
But again, this is because she views him almost as her, like, child.
Yeah.
He's not her equal. He is her lesser. He is the person that she is caring for, which is also why she can't accept him, because no woman wants to marry her child.
And this is also why so many people ship Joe and Laurie, because they can see that it's a maternal feeling
Yeah.
that she has. And I think somebody said somewhere that very often sisters become pseudo mothers for their brothers. So I think something like that is going on here.
Yeah.
And I think in Little Man, there's a scene where Daisy, she admires her brother a lot, like she adores Demi.
Yes.
And then she's always taking care of him. Like she brings him food, she irons his clothes and whatever. Daisy does all these things. And Daisy likes to do that. Daisy's very girly girl. She's very maternal. But then she also does that because Demi is her brother and she loves her brother. And I feel the same with Joe and Laurie sometimes.
Yeah, definitely. Now I must go and prepare Mr. Lawrence to be very kind to my poor boy. I wish he loved Beth. Perhaps he may in time, but I begin to think I was mistaken about her. Oh dear, how can girls like to have lovers and refuse them? I think it's dreadful. Being sure that no one could do it so well as herself, she went straight to Mr. Lawrence, told the hard story bravely through, and then broke down, crying so dismally over her own insensibility that the kind old gentleman, though sorely disappointed, did not utter a reproach. He found it difficult to understand how any girl could help loving Laurie, and hoped she would change her mind, but he knew even better than Joe that love cannot be forced. So he shook his head sadly and resolved to carry his boy out of harm's way. For young impetuosity's parting words to Joe disturbed him more than he would confess. This reminds me too of one of the other things I liked about the 1933 version was I feel like they did a better job of presenting Mr. Lawrence as having the good heart he actually had. I feel like some other versions, I think it may have been the anime version that came out in the 80s. I thought that Mr. Lawrence seemed scary, and it seemed like Laurie thought he was scary, and everybody was afraid of him. But like when you're reading the book, he's really is kind. He just is a little bit strict.
Yeah, it's interesting because when I was a child and I would read Little Woman, I kind of thought that Mr. Lawrence was very scary. But then later on, I thought that he's actually very nice and gentle. And
Yeah.
then I didn't really get why he and Laurie were arguing so much until I understood more of that thing with his parents. He's a very kind and gentle soul, and I think there's some parallel to Aunt March there because he has lost all his family members except Laurie, and then Aunt March has lost her husband and her child. She's bitter for the world because of that. Well, I think Amy is really the one that can soften Aunt March. Mr. Lawrence, he really loves his grandson, and I really like that in the 1978 series there's a moment when Laurie, when he's in the billiard hall, and then his grandfather finds him, and then they start fighting. The next day, Laurie goes back home, and he tells that, oh, Mr. March is wounded, and he's going to need our help. And there's this moment when the grandfather wants to give him a hug, but Laurie, he crosses his hands, like, I don't want you to touch me. You have insulted me. But then it also shows that how difficult that relationship is because Laurie can't get the affection from him that he craves. He gets that from Joe, that petting.
Yeah.
When Laurie came home, dead tired but quite composed, his grandfather met him as if he knew nothing and kept up the delusion very successfully for an hour or two. But when they sat together in the twilight, the time they used to enjoy so much, it was hard work for the old man to ramble on as usual, and harder still for the young one to listen to praises of the last year's success, which to him now seemed love's labor lost. He bore it as long as he could, then went to his piano and began to play. The windows were open, and Joe, walking in the garden with Beth, for once understood music better than her sister, for he played the sonata pathetic and played it as he never did before.
See, this is another example of how they could have used his music more in some of these other films.
True.
Because I mean, the only reason he wasn't really pursuing music as much was because he was trying to be a serious man.
He has all this success in school, but now he feels that it was a love's labor lost. Like
Yeah,
it shows that he didn't went to school because of himself, but because of Joe. That's not really a good reason to go to a school.
no.
I kind of feel that Laurie should have gone to study music or something that he actually enjoyed. Be university or college wasn't the best place for him. That would be my new headcanon.
Yeah, that's very fine, I dare say, but it's sad enough to make one cry. Give us something gayer, lad, said Mr. Lawrence, whose kind old heart was full of sympathy, which he longed to show but knew not how. Laurie dashed into a livelier strain, played stormily for several minutes, and would have got through bravely if in a momentary lull Mrs. March's voice had not been heard calling, "Joe, dear, come in, I want you." Just what Laurie longed to say, with a different meaning. As he listened, he lost his place, the music ended with a broken chord, the musician sat silent in the dark. "I can't stand this," muttered the old gentleman. Up he got, groped his way to the piano, laid a kind hand on either of the broad shoulders, and said, as gently as a woman, "I know, my boy, I know." And see, this is another one of those examples. He is a sweet old man. He loves his grandson so much.
It's not so easy for him to show emotion, but
Yeah.
he does show some affection for him.
And I mean, especially with him having lost his own son, I think he does a really good job of letting his walls down, considering what he's already been through.
Yeah. Then there's an end to it, and he shook off his grandfather's hands with an impatient motion, for too grateful for the sympathy, his man's pride could not bear a man's pity. Not quite. I want to say one thing, and then there shall be end of it, returned Mr. Lawrence with unusual mildness. You won't care to stay at home just now, perhaps. I don't intend to run away from a girl. Joe can prevent my seeing her, and I shall stay and do it as long as I like, interrupted Laurie in a defiant tone. Not if you are the gentleman I think of you. I am disappointed, but the girl can't help it, and the only thing left for you to do is to go away for a time. Where will you go? Anywhere. I don't care what becomes of me. And Laurie got up with a reckless laugh and grated on his grandfather's ear. Take it like a man and don't do anything rash. For God's sake, Why not go abroad as you planned and forget it? I can't, but you've been invited to go, and I promised you should when you got through the college. I have another red flag here in this part where Laurie says, I don't intend to run away from a girl. Joe can prevent my seeing her, and I shall stay and do it as long as I like.
Right? No, he would have, if it wasn't for his grandfather, he would have been over at her house every day, making her uncomfortable until she ran off to New York again. That's how it would have ended up going.
Exactly. He wants to guilt trip Joe forever. And
Yep.
that's so disturbing. That's getting stalkerish.
100%. But I didn't mean to go alone, and Laurie walked past the room with an expression which it was well his grandfather did not see. I don't ask you to go alone. There's someone ready and glad to go with you, anywhere in the world. Who, sir? Stopping to listen. Myself. Laurie came back as quickly as he went and put out his hand, saying huskily, I'm a selfish brute. But you know, grandfather. Lord help me, yes, I do know, for I've been through it all before, once in my own young days and then with your father. Now, my dear boy, just sit quietly down and hear my plan. It's all settled and can be carried out at once, said Mr. Lawrence, keeping hold of the young man, as if fearful that he would break away as his father had done before him.
This is kind of parallel because Amy's in Europe with Aunt March and now Laurie's going with his grandfather. It just goes to prove my theory that Louisa May Alcott planned these couples when she was writing part 1. And maybe before that.
Well, and you think about too about the relationship of like Laurie going over to Aunt March's house to visit Amy when Beth had scarlet fever. I feel like that is such a huge setup for their future relationship.
I always felt that way.
You know, that's something else I feel like is left out more of the films than should be. Just like half the time the parrot gets left out, right, in the movie. Then maybe people wouldn't be cheering so much for Joe and Laurie to get together when he proposes because we will have already seen how well they get along. Earlier, they really explored that section of the book, but we're so focused on don't die, Beth, that we don't see the whole Amy being worried about her family and feeling miserable and lonely and Laurie being her like one comfort there.
Somebody said that when in the 1994 film, when Laurie and takes Amy to stay at Aunt March.
She asks him to kiss her before she dies, right? And he agrees that he will kiss her before she dies. Yeah.
Like that is meant to set up their relationship. I can see that also in the book because I always felt that part when Laurie goes to see Amy at Aunt March, it means something because Laurie can always have this choice not to go, but he chooses to go there.
And that again supports the idea that it was more important to him to marry the family than it was to marry one particular girl. Because in the same time period that he's going to see Amy, he's still over at the March house a lot, checking on Joe and checking on Beth and being of service to anyone he can.
There's a moment in the Learning to Forget chapter where Laurie thinks to himself that, well, marrying Amy is almost as good as marrying Joe.
Yeah.
So it kind of goes with that idea that he did wanted to marry to the family. Then he also begins to see how much more well suited Amy is for him. Well, sir, what is it? And Laurie sat down without a sign of interest in face or voice. There's a business in London that needs looking after. I meant you should attend to it, but I can do it better myself, and things here will get on very well with Brooke to manage them. My partners do almost everything. I'm merely holding on till you take my place and can be off at any time. But you hate traveling, sir. I can't ask it of you at your age, began Laurie, who was grateful for the sacrifice, but much preferred to go alone if he went at all. The old gentleman knew that perfectly well, and particularly desired to prevent it, for the mood in which he found his grandson assured him that it would not be wise to leave him to his own devices, so stifling a natural regret at the thought of the home comforts he would leave behind him, he said stoutly, Bless your soul, I'm not superannuated yet. I quite enjoy the idea. It will do me good, and my old bones won't suffer, for traveling nowadays is almost as easy as sitting in a chair. A restless movement from Laurie suggested that his chair was not easy, or that he did not like the plan, and made the old man add hastily, I don't mean to be a marplot or a burden. I go because I think you'd feel happier than if I was left behind. I don't intend to go gad about you, but leave you free to go where you like. While I amuse myself in my own way, I have friends in London and Paris, and should like to visit them. Meantime, you can go to Italy, Germany, Switzerland, where you will, and enjoy pictures, music, scenery, and adventures to your heart's content. Mr. Lawrence as a travel companion.
I mean, I think it just shows how much just he loves Laurie. He basically was creating a home base for Laurie in Europe. He was creating this safe haven that Laurie's not just going to go treat it as this self-destructive thing because his grandfather's only a boat ride away at any point. It's not like he's in a totally different world.
He wants to let him do his own thing, then he also wants to spend time with him.
Now, Laurie felt just then that his heart was entirely broken and the world a howling wilderness. But at the sound of certain words which the old gentleman artfully introduced into his closing sentence, the broken heart gave an unexpected leap, and a green oasis or two suddenly appeared in the howling wilderness. He sighed and then said in a spiritless tone, Just as you like, sir. It doesn't matter where I go or what I do. It does to me, remember that, my lad. I give you entire liberty, but I trust you to make an honest use of it. Promise me that, Laurie. Anything you like, sir. Good, thought the old gentleman. You don't care now, but there'll come a time when that promise will keep you out of mischief, or I'm much mistaken. He's a good man. I love Mr. Lawrence.
I have highlighted this part. I trust you to make an honest use of it, and then written, he doesn't.
Right.
Not in the beginning.
Not in the beginning, no. He eventually figures it out.
Laurie needs to grow from a boy to become a man. Being an energetic individual, Mr. Lawrence struck while the iron was hot, and before the blighted being recovered spirit enough to rebel, they were off. During the time necessary for preparation, Laurie bore himself as a young gentleman usually do in such cases. He was moody, irritable, and pensive by turns, lost his appetite, neglected his dress, and devoted much time to playing tempestuously on his piano, avoided Jo, but consoled himself by staring at her from his window with the tragical face that haunted her dreams. I have another red flag here.
Right. Yeah. He's Edward from Twilight right now.
Yeah. By night, and oppressed her with a heavy sense of guilt by day. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, plus 5, 11. I have 12 red flags in this chapter.
Yeah, that sounds about right. This is the thing is, Laurie has been this person the whole time. He didn't just suddenly become this stalker type guy. I mean, think about it. He admits, like in the very beginning when he first meets Jo, that he's been watching her family through this window. He admits it. You leave the curtain up and I watch your family through your window. That's a little scary, you know?
I know he's very lonely and he doesn't know anyone when he moves there. But that's still kind of creepy because it's 4 girls in the other house.
With only their mother and their housekeeper. You know, it's a house full of women. Kind of give him a pass, right, to begin with, because, oh, he's young and he's lonely. But at this point, he should be a man and he should know by this point that you do not stare at women through their windows.
How much of that has to do with that chapter where Laurie makes those letters to Meg? You know, you kind of get the feeling that he sees himself above Meg, and then now he sees himself above Jo.
Yeah.
It's really disturbing. But I think it also kind of goes with that whole idea that Jo and Laurie, they fed each other with ideas that were not very healthy. They both had quite misogynistic ideas about women at some point.
I do feel like the 1994 film does do a good job of showing Laurie kind of getting that superiority issue with Meg because of when she's there at Sally Moffat's and he basically makes a comment about her showing her cleavage and makes a comment about her drinking champagne. I think that in one way you view the scene and you're like, oh, he's just reminding her of like what her family's values are. But on the other hand, it's like, just let Meg have some fun and get off your high horse, Laurie.
Even though Meg is older than Laurie, maybe it's because of the privilege that he has.
Probably. And his being a male.
Yeah, that too. The part where Laurie sends those letters to Meg, it always bothers me because he not only thinks about how painful it's going to be for Meg, but then it's a really nasty thing to do for John because John is so poor. And Laurie knows that John likes Meg.
Oh, this goes with their pranking and stuff. And this is his immaturity, though, right? He doesn't take other people's hearts so seriously as he takes his own.
Like, my pain is more important than other people's pain.
Yeah.
In the 19th century, that was considered very romantic, and that's also interesting how our views are so different now.
No, I'm like, romantic to me is somebody who respects me and who values me. Like, that's the biggest romantic thing possible. Who listens. Ooh, that's a big romantic one. That was actually probably the first thing that attracted me to my husband. Was he's one of the first people I felt like really actually listened to me when I spoke. But again, that goes with respect, right? If you respect someone, you're going to actually listen to them, and not just listen to respond, but listen to know them.
That's true.
That's a more like a Friedrich type thing.
I was reading some of these letters that Louisa got from her fans, where the little girls were like, we were so heartbroken when Joe said no to Laurie. And these were like 9, 10, 12-year-old girls. I feel like they identify so much with Laurie, but then they don't have these experiences of having these kind of unfortunate situations with young men.
It's probably also the whole like fairy tale build up, right? The prince is going to come in and, oh, he's so charming and he's so beautiful, and oh, my family loves him and he loves my family and he just happens to be filthy rich. It's totally the fairy tale setup. It's not a fairy tale to go in, most fairy tales don't happen with you fall in love with the poor foreigner. That's the other thing is Laurie seems more American, even though he's only half American anyway. I would be curious to see if girls nowadays are more receptive to the idea of Friedrich versus back in the day, because I think that we've done a better job, like, in society, is romanticizing, like, foreign men instead of it being like, oh, at least in America, being the all-American. I know a lot of women who would much rather find it romantic to fall in love with a man who had an accent.
I think also because when the book came out, there was lots of hate against Germans.
Oh, that's true.
And then a lot of people were very poor. And now when people read Little Women, young girls, well, I don't think most of them are poor, maybe middle class, but back then, a lot of the readers were poor, and women, they didn't have opportunities to work. Like, girls couldn't really dream about having a career. They dreamt about getting married with a rich man. So I think that's also why Laurie was so popular.
Yeah, because it's like a dream come true. It's this rich man is offering to marry you, and now you won't have to worry about anything. And you've already been proposed to on top of that. So there's all of your worries are gone.
Exactly what Laurie's offering to Joe. But then a lot of the readers, of course, failed to understand Joe's character.
Yeah.
And some people still do fail to understand that.
Oh, but look, again, we've kind of got the Twilight situation, right? Because in Twilight, Edward and his family have like endless amounts of money. And also, obviously, he could offer immortality on top of that, But there are these toxic elements, the stalker type of stuff, the possessiveness. That's interesting because I hadn't thought about the whole how both of these ideas go ahead and fall into that fairy tale aspect of you find a prince who then can fix all your problems for you, essentially.
And then Joe and Friedrich, they're so normal. They are not as dashy.
Yeah.
He's sweet, but he's poor.
Yeah.
He's stout. He has a beard. I love him. But
Yeah.
he's not the dream man of most people, most
Yeah.
women. But he's Joe's dream man, apparently, because he's based on Henry David Thoreau and Goethe and all these things that Louisa May Alcott found attractive. But
Yeah.
then she had a very unique taste, and she was a very unique woman. So
Yeah.
to me, Little Woman makes perfect sense with its marriages.
Oh, 100%. Because she was attracted to intelligent people. That was, I think, her biggest draw was the intelligence of a man.
Thank you so much for listening, and I will see you next time. Take care and make good choices. Bye.